remember is that in the ancient world, there were a few things that characterized a city. Not on the sheet, so you have to write. The first one that made a city was that the city was populated and that a big population. And that is not strange if you think about it. Most cities in the world are overpopulated, like Kingston and St. Andrews, right? Okay. People usually gravitate towards cities, Montego Bay, Kingston, Mandeville. And that is because the second reason why they are some characteristics of a city is usually it is a center for commerce. And because it's a center for commerce, of course, activities going on all the time. You have trading taking place, people coming and so forth and all that. The third thing with these Asian cities is that usually there is good sanitation, so the infrastructure is better. And here people say Kingston is not Jamaica, and it's true. But the reality is that you will find that there is probably better light, better sewage system, better internet, and that kind of thing in the city. And so those were some of the things in the Asian city. In fact, the water supply was also significant in those kind of things. Another thing with the Asian city is Asian cities that have some kind of order in terms of laws that govern the activity of the people in the city. So these are some characteristics of the city that made a city a city. And it is for this reason, if you read the Bible carefully, or you read anywhere, you'll notice that if there's war, the first thing they try to do is capture the city, because the city is the hub of everything that happens in that country. And usually the leaders are in the city, are near to the city. We have come to the place in history where people live in the suburbs, but they come to the city for work and so forth and all that. So the city is then very important. Now, if you have been journeying through Nehemiah so far, you will know that the first thing that came to Nehemiah was that the walls were broken down and the gates were burned, remember? And so what happened is a number of people were not in the city because it was not protected. And therefore they had gone to live in the villages and so forth and all that. But now that the walls are back intact, you remember that one of the stipulations Nehemiah put was the guard, because they didn't have sufficient people in the city and they didn't want anybody to come and overrun it or capture it or what have you. So at this point in time, as Nehemiah is about to probably depart, he wants to ensure that the city is repopulated. And so this is what this chapter is about, the population of Jerusalem. I should say repopulating Jerusalem, because remember, when they lost the war, they had taken out the major people, carried them away, like Daniel and all those guys, and now the city is up and running again, and we need to populate the city. So that's where we are. All right, so let's go from here. So verses 1 and 2 are of great importance to us because it sets the stage. Now the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem. So there are some leaders there. The rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of every 10 of them to live in Jerusalem. The whole city, the holy city, while the remaining 9 were to stay in their own towns. The people commended all who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. So there are several things that are in these 2 verses. Let's look at them. First thing we see is the method employed. So what happened is they decided that they're going to repopulate Jerusalem, but that to repopulate Jerusalem from the villages that were around. And what they decided, the method was that they would bring a certain number of people from the villages. But what they did was cast lots. You know, that was one of the ways that they believed God spoke. So they pray about it, they cast lots, and whoever the lot fall on, they'd say, you are selected. If if you remember, even when you go down to the New Testament, come to you, New Testament, when they were trying to replace Judas, they cast lots. You remember that? And there are several places where they cast lots, because that was a way in which they thought God spoke. Yes.
Can I explain more about casting lots? Because I remember with Jonah, they casted lots and the lot fell upon Jonah.
Right.
So I was wondering if it's like a draw, like a stick that can draw.
Maybe it was a draw stick. Yeah.
Oh.
There are different things that people have said, and something the straw, and you draw the straw, and it falls on Jonah. If you remember, in the priests, the high priest had the Urim and the Turim, and he would throw them, and depending on how they turn, if the two of them turn like two heads, or two tails, or a tail and a head, they will determine whether God said yes, no, or wait. So it is something like that. So they cast lots to determine who should be brought into the city. Secondly, they decided on a ratio. Now, everybody can't come to the city, you know. So they decided on a ratio. And the ratio was, out of every 9, out of every 10 families, 1 family would come and 9 would remain. What does it remind you of? If you take in 1 part out of 10, what it reminds you of? Huh? 1/10, what is it? It's like a tide, right, very good. So it's like they're bringing 10% of the people from all the different places into the city. You're not overcrowding the city, but what you want to ensure is that sufficient persons were in the city. Because if somebody came upon the city, of course, being in the city meant you have to defend the country, right? Because you're the first point of attack, and I told you why it's the first point of attack. Then the third thing we find is that those who the lot fell on, they were willing to accept. They were willing to accept the challenge of coming to live in the city. Alright? So nobody there said, why we not go? Which is very, very good. Is that people, as they understood the need, they understood that certain people need to come into the city, and understanding that, they put up themselves, so if the lot fall on me, I wouldn't quarrel. They would go. Of course, what they would have been is that the lot would be like, say for instance, we have here some families. We have Brother Brown here, we have Brother Smith here, we have Brother Barrett here. It would be the fathers, and whoever might fall on, your whole family have to move. So it's not just one person, but the families would move. So whichever family fell on, that family then would move into the city to repopulate the city. Everybody follow? Good? Alright. So notice, there was nobody who hesitated to take up the task. Everybody who on whom the lot fell, they were willing to come. They were willing to join. And then notice now, the people appreciated the fact that they said yes. And so they blessed them. Appreciation was expressed, and they blessed them. They blessed them for being willing to come into the city and to repopulate the city and to establish the city of Jerusalem again, which was the holy city, the city of God. Right? Now, having done that, what the chapter does next is that the chapter then gives you a list of the persons, various lists of persons who came from various groups. So that's all the chapter is about next. I can't read it, verses 3 to 6, the list of the sons of Judah. And so basically, we're talking about Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is in Judah, and you have Judah and Benjamin, those 2 tribes make up Judah. So that's the whole list there. So the first thing we see is the list of the sons of Judah. Then verses 7 to 9, a list of the sons of Benjamin. Right? You can go and try and read those names if you want. So we know that the city is going to comprise of persons from the tribe of Judah and tribe of Benjamin, which together was referred to as Judah. Okay? And then we go to verses 10 through 14, a list of the priests to lead the religious life of the people. And you notice it's a fairly long list. But what is important is you cannot have a city established and there is no religious activity. And remember, because the people of God are theocentric people, or should be a theocentric people, which means that God is the center of what they do, then of course the religious life of the people very important. And so among the persons who are chosen, you are choosing the priests to carry on the religious activities that are important to the people. Alright, everybody good so far? Yeah. Alright, very good. Then you'll notice that the verses 15 through 18, there's a list of Levites to attend to the preparation of the temple. So you'll notice that, and that's a trend that is interesting, because here we have the priests, the ones who will make the sacrifices, and if somebody's sick, have to go to the priest have to fast to say, okay, that kind of, all those kind of things, just the priests have to be there. But the Levites were the persons who took care of the maintenance of the sanctuary and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that today, and probably I'm using Bethel, that some of us don't understand the significance of being able to work in the temple of the Lord, to give service to God. And we see that as they repopulate the city, one of the significant things one of the significant group is a group of persons who are going to ensure that the sanctuary, that the temple was well looked after. You get the follow? And so here we have a list of persons who are going to be able to look after the welfare of the temple, so that the worship of Almighty God would be central to the people. And this is, if you go back to the wilderness, you'll notice that the tabernacle was set up in what? The center. All the tribes camped around the tabernacle, because that kind of configuration was to remind them that God is the center of all they do. And so it is not surprising that in the list of persons who are there, they are highlighting for us those who must take care of the temple of God in order that the people will worship God in proper. See? And so when you have a role to play, if you are the usher, if you are in charge of the sound, if you do projection, if you are chairing the program, if you are in the choir, whatever role you play is significant. It is significant to God that you play that role, and you play that role well. Because in playing that role, you are advancing the message of the gospel. And so here we have then a list, and in this list we have the Levites. I'm going to say more. When you go to verses 19 to 21, we have a list of the gatekeepers. The problem in our days would be the ushers, right? And again, it is significant. Now, these gatekeepers are not just gatekeepers of the temple, but also gatekeepers of the what? Of the city gates. And remember, the city gates must be manned. Can I take up the Psalm 127? In vain, the watchman watcheth but in vain. But it gives you the impression that there are always people on the city wall. Not give the impression, there are always people on the city wall, the gatekeepers, watching to see if the enemy was coming, so that we can prepare if the enemy was coming. Even in the time of peace, people are on the city wall, right? And you can expect it in the time of war or death.
Looking back at the last, second to last study we had, when Nehemiah, when they were reading the books, I noticed that the same persons that they had there are the same persons.
The Levites, yeah, the same Levites. Yeah. Some of those names are there, right? Okay, good. But it's an important job to keep the city gates, right? As you can imagine. And though there are in the church persons who have to become, I want to say, persons who are always alert to danger, all right? Persons who might bring difficulty, right? Always alert to that. Okay, all right. Verses 22 to 24, the chief officers of the Levites in Jerusalem, and it tells you who that was. Now, so what we come from, there are three things from this that we need to watch. Right? First, you see the overseers of the Levites. So somebody is in charge of those who are doing the various things in the church. That's one of the things that's right. And then there's a very interesting one. The choir stars would love this one. The singers who lead the worship are And then it says, the singers who did the worship, they got a fixed provision by the order of the king. So all those who are in the choir got some daily provisions. Alright. Choir that's all come to me now. Right. So they were the ones who led the worship. Of course, you know, also, when they had battles, the singers went before, the musicians went before, and they played music and they sang. It's part of what they did with battles. So in this setup, they list for us the singers, the persons who led the worship, and then it said very clear that the king commanded that a portion be given to them, a daily portion. So it seems as if this was their job, and therefore they were compensated. And then the next thing we know, the sons of Zerah, Z-E-R-A-H, if we go back to the thing, and that's what it's spelled, Zerah's son, they were the union delegates. Right? If you have a city and you have a structure, you have to have somebody to speak for you. So it tells you in verse 24 that they were the king's agent in all affairs relating to the people. They were the ones who related the people's concerns to the king and so forth. So they were like the persons who were bringing the concerns of the people to the king and to make kind of what is the word I'm trying to find? Some kind of agreement in terms of how things go forward. That's very interesting, that because whichever era you live in, people are going to have issues that need to a representation, don't they? And right now we are many issues as we move towards the general election. I'm saying one of the problems we have today, especially with the younger people, is that we take civics out of school. And they don't understand government and what government should do. When I was in school, we did civics, which talks about the whole parliamentary system and the whole governmental system, what government should do, and all that kind of stuff. I think the young people don't have that. So their decisions are sometimes not as informed in terms of how the far-reaching effects of some decision on the people until they talk. So that's unfortunate, because I think that everybody who lives in our country must have a sense of how government work and what they should look for in a good government, in good governance. And I think that when we move that from the schools, we did an injustice to the young. That's my belief, right? That's my belief. I think that if they were more exposed to these kind of things, the kind of government where it come from, the history of it, and what we break out from England, what we keep from England, it might give you a better idea of what it is in terms of what it takes to run a country, right? And I think that we are poor of that. So, but they had some union delegates, my words, right? Then, of course, verses 25 to 36, who find for you to see, really just tell us about the various villages, a list of the villages that were around Jerusalem. So, yes, Jerusalem is the center, and all these things are happening, and then the villages that were around that were supported would have been supported by the activity in Jerusalem, because if they, just like how in today's world, most people who live in the rural area go to the town center, but most of the things they do, don't they? Because you can't put everything in every corner. Just like how some of us go on certain things, we go downtown or we go uptown, because in the residential sections you're not going to find those things. In a similar sense, the villages around Jerusalem would have depended on Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is where the center is, where the commerce is going to happen, and all the things that you need. So you have to come from the village if you want to benefit from some of the things within the center. And this is why it was so critical then for the center to be repopulated, for there to be a buzz going on, for people to have trade, to have commerce, to have that kind of thing and activity. So if the center is down, if there is nothing happening in the center, then you can understand it's going to affect the people around. This is a part of the reason why Nehemiah was so sad when he heard that Jerusalem was in ruins, because it meant that the people that were around would have to undergo a level of, let's say, suffering or lack because there's no way where you can import and export, if you want to use those words, back and forth, that kind of trade that will build them up and give them a better quality of life. I want to use that though as I conclude as a kind of means to say something to us, because I still believe the church is central to our community. And even when the community don't realize the church is central because the church offers what nobody else offers, the matter of salvation and the way to eternal life. Jamaica has moved to a place where in many cases people disregard the church. Jamaica suffered because of that. When people had greater regard for the church and for God, Jamaica was in a better place. Might I say? But we have to ensure that we have fire in our churches that attracts people to the church. We have to ensure that people always have their opinion, people always say what they want to say. But we must ensure that the kind of life that we live and what we represent and what we showcase is at the place where people want it, where they can see God's works. Just like how in the early church, the people were able to see that the disciples had been with God. And I was trying to make that point Sunday morning. I hope it was made that if you are a Christian, you must be different because God has called you to be different. And this is why the whole matter of worship was central to the repopulating of the city and the setting up of the city. Is to ensure that God remains the center of everything. The whole of the book of Nehemiah is about the activity of God, about it, and the provision of God, and the protection of God. And therefore, if we are experiencing that in our own life, Jesus said, "Hey, that you might have life and have it more abundantly." If we are experiencing that in our lives, then that connection with God must be very clear for people to see. And the text says, coming to your the text says, when they see your good works, they will what? Glorify your Father who is in heaven. So our goal must be to glorify, must do deeds that glorify God, that draw people to the church and make them want to become people of God. My challenge to us then is to remember that the church is the center of all communities. The churches are important to the life of the community. And what we do in church is critical in terms of the witness we make for Jesus. And individually, we must make sure we make a good witness so that the combination of our good witnesses will make a strong, or give a strong message